After the proprietor finished serving the food, she bowed and left. The room was very tastefully put together, reminding them of a tea ceremony room. While it was sparsely decorated, quite a bit of money had obviously gone into it. This was a very famous Japanese restaurant, where many high-up officials and other important people held secret meetings. Takano was there, accompanied by about 5 gentlemen. She was sitting slightly further away from the men. They were clearly in a much more important position than she was. One of the men, wearing an expensive double-breasted suit, told Takano not to be so nervous.
どうぞお楽に、高野さん。今回の件、非常に興味深く読ませていただきました。このような研究が数十年にわたり眠り続けてきたとは。
They've used this music before. I feel like this is like the ending music, you know, like the everything is coming together music. Maybe not the ending music, but like the, you know, tomorrow we're going to start the real plan music that they've used a few times. I think that's how they use it.
驚きです。過去に行われていたこの類の研究はほとんどが実らず、スタッフも解散となって何も残っていないと思っておりましたよ。
And nothing was left after the U.S. military confiscated even the fundamental research.
この研究は上層部にもほとんど相手にされなかったと聞いております。
なるほど。故に誰にも知られず、そして誰の追及も受けなかったというわけですな。その意味においてだけは本当に幸運でした。
高野先生の研究を高野さんが引き継ぐとは面白い。これも因縁ですかな。まるであなたの体を借りて個人が研究を完成させようとしているかのようです。
本当にそうかもしれませんわね。私も奇妙な因縁を感じます。
Takano adored Takano Hifumi and called him grandfather, but she hadn't revealed that relationship to others. She realized it wouldn't be beneficial for people to think she was involving personal feelings in her continuing Dr. Takano's research. So publicly, she once had exchanged it with Takano Hifumi, and after his death discovered his research documents with his remains, and chose to carry it on. At least that's how the story went.
それで先生方、いかがでしょうか。
いくつかの省庁がね、非常に強い関心を持ったよ。中川君が言うには、防衛庁の技術研究本部が強い関心を示してくれてね、研究のスポンサーを名乗り出てくれた。
おお、それは朗報じゃないですか。おめでとう、高野さん。
ありがとうございます。
なんでも向こうが言うにはね。
There's a research council for next generation deterrence being led by experts from several different ministries.
この中でアルファベットプロジェクトというのがあるらしい。高野さんはご存知ですかな？
There was no way she would know about something like that. But it was very possible for these nationalists to research something dangerous without citizens knowing about it. Society forms something like a web made of connections between people. People hold hands with other people who share the same ideas and end up knitting a net. Of course, some nets are well known, but there are some secret ones too. So there was no way of guessing just how the men at this meeting were connected. A society involving research into deterrent weapons for the next generation. The Alphabet Project. With those words, it was possible to imagine what that might entail. Deterrent weapons. That usually refers to nuclear technology. Weapons are normally used to destroy enemies. However, the general idea of deterrent weapons is very different. The assumption is that they won't actually be used against anyone. Nuclear weapons are largely used as a threat to prevent enemy invasion. Both the US and Soviets possessed large stockpiles of nuclear arms, keeping each other in check. But they will never actually use them. Because if they did, there'd be a nuclear war, and both countries would be destroyed. So they're like a legendary weapon you never draw. Of course, that last resort only works because both sides have nuclear weapons. If one side lacks them, then they lose all military negotiation power. In other words, nations without nukes are powerless before nuclear-armed states. That can't be true. Japan abandoned nukes and it still functions as a nation today. Or so some people may be thinking, but they're wrong. Japan abandoned nukes, but lies under the nuclear umbrella by allying itself with America. That means the nation functions thanks to America's nukes. However, that also means we must resign ourselves to forever being a vassal of America. In order for Japan to escape that, and become a powerful nation equal to America, it must possess its own deterrence arms, and step out of that nuclear umbrella. That society must have been put together by experts who believe in that ideal. Given that, even the name Alphabet Project makes sense. Nuclear weapons are weapons of mass destruction. However, weapons of mass destruction aren't always nuclear. They also include biological weapons and chemical weapons. Atomic, biological, chemical, the initials of these words make up ABC. That's why weapons of mass destruction are sometimes called ABC weapons. I won't go into weapons of mass destruction that don't belong to those two categories. ABC, alphabet. In other words, Alphabet Project must be a code for research into weapons of mass destruction. As it happened, this guess of Takano's was correct. By rights, Japan should possess nuclear arms. We established ourselves as a peace-loving nation after the war, and after our vast international contributions, we've been recognized as a permanent member of the UN. Yet until we possess nuclear arms, we won't be recognized as a proper nation. That is the long-held desire of post-war Japan. Exactly. However, realistically, thanks to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the major nations hold a monopoly on nukes. Worse, our domestic public opinion is growing allergic to nukes, so foreign and domestic pressures make implementing them impossible. Biological and chemical weapons are sometimes known as the poor man's nuke. Small countries that can't own nuclear weapons have already started research into that kind of weaponry. Ha ha ha, Takano-san. Please don't misunderstand us, okay? The purpose of our research isn't to obtain a biological weapon. Instead, our goal is to prevent such weapons from coming into Japan from other countries. So this research into self-defense, we want you to understand it. Yes, I'm aware of that. Takano hated this Japanese tendency to make excuses, but she didn't let it show in her face. No matter what they said, they already saw the value in using this research towards biological weaponry. However, in truth, that was just an excuse as well. If they actually wanted to research biological weapons, then it would be much faster to research diseases like smallpox and anthrax instead of an unidentified disease like Hinamizawa syndrome. So it wasn't actually correct to say the defense agency was interested in it as a biological weapon. In other words, Takano needed a powerful sponsor who could back her up with funding, personnel, and a facility to conduct her research. So she used her connections and turned to the old men behind the government and economy, reaching out to each of them and getting them to forcibly pull funding out of the defense agency under the excuse of its application towards biological weaponry. That was the truth. Therefore, her project wasn't officially recognized by the defense agency. To be exact, the people who secretly controlled the defense agency were the ones who knew about it. These masterminds diverted funding from the defense agency to the Alphabet Project. And then they pushed for Takano's research to be a part of it. Takano gets her funding, and the influencers get to drain public funds through kickbacks. Considering that, it was doubtful this project was genuinely about researching the next generation of deterrence arms. It was probably just an excuse for the masterminds to funnel money into their own pockets. Well, those complicated matters didn't matter to Takano. Whatever those old men and influencers were planning wasn't her business. As long as she could get the funding for her research, that was enough. Either way, Takano had found her sponsor. It was one of the biggest organizations around too. This had always been her grandfather's dream. Takano was trying to stay calm, but she was about to jump up and down in excitement.
中川君としては今回の件十分に研究が進んだら丸ごと買い取って構わないと言ってくれてる。まだまだ未完の研究だが、その将来性については十分に理解できてるようだ。
おっしゃる通りです。この研究はまだ道半ばで、十分な資金と施設、人材が欠かせません。
それでだね、ここからが交渉になるんだが、向こうとしてはこの研究丸ごと抱えてしまいたいのが希望らしいんだ。こう言っちゃ悪いんだが、君一人に任せるには荷が重いと考えてる。
Hearing that put quite the damper on Takano's ecstasy.
私はお金が欲しくて研究しているのではありません。一人の研究者としての知的探求心からです。私に必要なのはスポンサー。先方が求めるのは成果。そういう関係に期待したかったのですが。
Takano realized she was talking rather breathlessly, so she tried to calm herself down. Either way, they'd be backing the research. Considering they're hoping for results that merit the budget, they probably feel that Takano is still too young to handle it.
分かってます。高野さんが今日まで積み上げてきた研究を横からかっさらわれたんじゃ、それはあんまりですからね。そこは私もよく分かってます。もちろん向こうにもそれは伝えました。それで出てきた折衷案がこれです。まずアルファベットプロジェクト内の新規事業として高野さんの研究を立ち上げます。理事会の承認を経れば正式に予算をつけることができますからね。高野さんには客員という形でプロジェクトに参加していただき、研究に携わるという形になります。
If she wanted their funding, she'd have to fall under their authority, of course. So far, she had no objections.
ただ、研究会は今回の研究に予算をつけるにあたり、いくつかの条件を挙げています。一つは、先ほど先生が申し上げたこの度の研究に関する分野で優秀な才能を持つ人物に研究筆頭を委ねることです。
お言葉を返すようですが、私以上にこの研究に詳しい人物が高野先生を除いて存在するとお思いですか？
まあ、そこは高野さん抑えて。お気持ちはごもっともです。
それではその人物に私が研究を売り渡すのと何も変わらないではありませんか。全く話が違います。
落ち着きなさい、高野さん。
Those cunning old men didn't miss sight of the faint leak of anger that crossed Takano's expression. They gave evasive laughs, as if remarking how immature she still was if she let her emotions show over such a little thing. However, they weren't laughing to look down on Takano. On the contrary, they were trying to tell her to wait until the end.
もちろんそこはあなたのやりやすいように手を打ちます。小泉先生からあなたをよろしく頼むと念をされているんです。大恩ある小泉先生に託されたあなたは大丈夫です。ここは一つ私に任せてください。あなたもそして連中も納得するうまい妥結点を用意します。
と申しますと？
その人物の人選は私が握っているということですよ。
Everyone chortled except Takano. After a moment, she joined in. In other words, he meant that he would find just the right person. The defense agency had suggested finding an expert to lead the project because they didn't feel comfortable with just Takano. However, Takano's sponsor was the one tasked to find such a person. In that moment, Takano realized it. Ah, how wonderful it is to have such a powerful backer.
万事私に任せてください。あなたがやりやすい候補者をこちらで探します。高野さんはその中から組みやすいと思う相手を選べばいいということです。
Takano felt better after hearing that. While she wouldn't be the official head of the project, she would end up leading it from the shadows. Of course, she wasn't an expert per se. Having a partner would actually be beneficial.
この件、しばらく先方と私の方で調整します。もちろん、高野さんの満足のいく形で決着できるようにしますので、しばらく朗報を待ってください。
はい。お世話になりますが、どうか。
そうだそうだ。防衛庁の話だけじゃないよ。厚生省の永田君も一枚噛んでくれるそうだよ。国立感染症予防研究所の伊藤君を紹介してくれてね。機材や技術についてのバックアップを名乗り出てくれてる。
本当ですか？ありがとうございます。
もうこれは立派な国家プロジェクトですな。おめでとう高野さん。これも今日までのあなたと、そして高野先生の地道な研究が評価された結果です。
いえ、すべて高野先生の努力の成果です。私などまだ何も。
謙虚なのは実にいいことです。小泉先生もおっしゃっておられましたが、本当に高野さんはいい方ですな。可愛がられているというのもうなずけます。
それでですね、向こうとしては高野さんの身分を防衛庁で預かってしまいたいようです。幸い高野さんは医師免許をお持ちですからね。研究本部の遺憾として身分を保証するようです。
公務員になれということですか？これは意外な話ですね。
アルファベットプロジェクトに携わる研究機関のほとんどは公的機関です。今回の研究は陸自も強い関心を寄せており、職員を陸自から派遣したいと強く要望してきています。ですので場合によっては身分は陸自の扱いになるかもしれません。まあこの辺は役人の縄張り争いだと思ってください。その役人たちの上に立つには役人の身分が必要になってくると、そういうわけですね。もちろんどういう形になろうとも高野さんが不快に思うようなことにはしませんから安心してください。
わかりました。そのあたりはお任せいたします。しかし高野先生がかつて軍にこの研究の援助を求めた時には断られたことを思うと、防衛庁が興味を示されたのが意外というか遅いというか複雑な気持ちですね。
それは仕方ありますまいな。
With the war situation worsening, the Japanese military sought something with immediate effect. Something that could turn the war around.
決して高野先生の研究を見下していたわけではないはずです。
That wasn't true, of course. Takano already heard that confession from the old man. She exhaled. To her, it was like the meeting in front of her was happening somewhere far away. She had longed for this day to come, and worked so hard to reach it. Finally, her grandfather and his research were attaining recognition. This was the day she had dreamed of. So she was frightened, just imagining that it might be an actual dream. True joy can't be felt all at once. Oftentimes, it's a delayed reaction. Takano thought that must be exactly what she was feeling.
すると思います。
多分左官クラスの階級が与えられるのではないでしょうか。となると高野さんは副隊長の地位になりますから、おそらく3佐ではないかと。
これは素晴らしい。高野三佐ですか。いやいや羨ましいですな。男に生まれたからには一度ぐらいは自分のことを階級で呼ばれてみたいものですが、いや高野三佐ですか。
三佐何ですか？
ああ、自衛隊の階級のことで三等陸佐のことです。企業でいうところの副部長くらいでしょうね。おそらくその階級がプロジェクト発足時に高野さんに与えられることになるかと思います。
昔でいうところの少佐ですよ。そういえば奇遇ですな。高野先生もかつては少佐の階級にあられたそうではありませんか。
Takano remembered suddenly. They were right. Her grandfather had been a lieutenant commander in the Japanese military. Everything she'd done until today was so she could continue her grandfather's research. Now everything had fallen into place. She'd even been granted the same rank as her grandfather. She'd always believed that succeeding his research would be proof that they had a tighter bond than blood. And now she would be even the same rank as him. This is fate, Takano thought. Maybe this is even a message from Grandpa. Yes, it must have been a shout of encouragement from heaven. It was proof that she inherited not only his research, but his will as well. Takano couldn't help but feel a sense of destiny for attaining the rank of major.
おじいちゃん、私ようやくここまで来たよ。
Nobody else could hear her say that, but her grandfather in heaven could. That's what Takano believed. She'd only come so far. There were still a lot of things to do for this research to be recognized as a great work. Otherwise, her grandfather won't become a god. She wouldn't become one either. You must become a god. That was in her grandfather's will. I was unable to do so. That line preceded it. It was her grandfather's dying wish. Her grandfather entrusted it to her. All of his research. A god can't be physically brought back to life. A god is made in the hearts of the people who remain alive. Her grandfather will live on in her heart. His exploits will be known to many, and all the scholars will fight to read his documents, to steal them from each other. And they will learn about Hifumi Takano, who began his research during the war. And they will know that nobody understood him, and that he ended up devoting his lonely life to his research. And finally, they will extol his grand achievement. We're kind of going in a different direction than most of the other chapters so far, you know? Any tips here? No tips. Maybe we won't be getting any tips. Yeah, I feel like we're heading in a different direction. You know, we're learning more about outside of the story of Hinamizawa again. We learned a lot of history. I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm not super familiar with World War II and, stuff that happened around that time. Of course I learned about that sort of stuff in school, but that was 10 years ago in high school that I would have learned about that sort of stuff. So it's a little unfamiliar, especially from the Japanese perspective. So all of that was just sort of like an information dump to me. But anyway, hope you guys are still enjoying so far. I meant to do this a little bit earlier in the week, but I very recently got a VR headset, completely unrelated to this, mind you, and I have been absolutely like sucked in by this thing. So the past couple of days where I was going to record this, I just like played with the VR headset for like 3-4 hours, and I was like, oh, I have to go to bed now. So sorry about that, but this should come out tomorrow. So anyway, hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you next time for some more Higurashi. Bye!